So in the early 1980s, I was living in Manhattan in New York City. I had this business job on Madison Avenue. I had an apartment on the Upper East Side. I had these business suits, and I was making a lot of money. And I went back to my college, Villanova, to see a friend. And she dragged me to a volunteer day that they had there. And there were different nonprofit groups there to present on volunteer opportunities. So one of the groups that was there was Covenant House, which was a shelter for homeless and runaway teenagers in New York City in Times Square. And there was a woman there. She introduced herself. She said her name was Marge Crawford. And she looked to be about in her 70s. She looked like a suburban grandmother. She had white hair, perfectly coiffed, makeup, like Papagallo shoes and Lily Pulitzer pants. She didn't look like somebody working with street kids in New York City. She showed this film, and she gave a talk about the work that they're doing. So I went up to her afterwards and said, I'm living in New York City. I would love to go and volunteer there, one day a week after work. So we exchanged phone numbers, and I went one day to Times Square. And Times Square back then was nasty. Right now, it's like Disney, Hard Rock Cafe. It was the center of the prostitution and pornography industry in New York. It was really a raunchy place. So I took the subway there, and I met her. She showed me around. I was really impressed with the work they were doing. And at the end, she said, we would love to have you come and volunteer one day a week, but there's a group of us who actually live here. We live in a tenement building in Times Square that Covenant House owns. There's about 40 of us. You get $12 a week, and you work with the kids. So if you want to do that, you need to come on an orientation. In fact, there's an opening in March. I'll put your name down for that week. So in my mind, I'm thinking, lady, what are you talking about? This is not in the plan at all. There is a world of difference going here one night a week after work and me leaving and quitting and completely interrupting my life to do this. But I calmed myself down in my mind, and I thought, let her put my name down. In a couple of weeks, I'll call before March rolls around, and I'll cancel. So I started to go every Tuesday night. I would take the subway to Times Square, and I would volunteer. And I would give out snacks, and I'd play basketball with the kids. And then March rolled around, and I didn't cancel. I thought, what's the harm in going on the orientation? Maybe this is something I want to do years from now after I've made lots of money. So I'll lie to my Madison Avenue employer, and I'll tell him I'm going on vacation, and I'll do the week. So I spent the week there. And even 33 years later, it's hard to put into words, but I knew by the end of that week that that's what I should be doing with my life. That the whole Madison Avenue scene and the money and everything was not me, that I was living a lie, and this is what I should be doing. So I quit my job, I gave my car to my brother, I gave the suits to Goodwill, I gave up the apartment, and I moved into Times Square. My family was apoplectic, my friends, my co-workers couldn't understand it, but to me it just seemed like the most sane thing I had ever done in my life. Thank you, Colin. So I made a one-year commitment. I ended up staying 2.5 years, and I really got to know this woman, Marge Crawford, really well. Just an incredible person, compassionate, caring, dedicated. And you know what I found out? This was a woman from means. She was from a wealthy, upstate New York, Republican family. And let's face it, most women and women and men in their 70s from that background would not be living in an ugly little tenement building working with street kids. They'd be playing golf every day and drinking Rob Roy's at night. So she had made an incredible commitment to do this work. So I stayed 2.5 years, and then I went to grad school. I stayed in New York City, and I stayed in the field of working with runaway and homeless kids. At about the 10-year point, I got a phone call from somebody who knew Marge. Marge's health had never been good. Even at Covenant House, she was on dialysis, and then she got cancer, and then she broke her hip. It was one thing after another. So this person called and said, Marge had checked this with her priest. She was very religious. She was going to stop the dialysis, so she was going to die. So if you wanted to go see Marge, now was the time to go and see her to say goodbye. So I went into, she was still living in this dumpy little tenement building in a little tiny room. So I went there, and there was a line in the room. It was like being at a wake, except the person was alive. So you only had like a minute or two. So I went in, and she was totally lucid. She seemed weak, but she was lucid. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm running this home for homeless kids in Brooklyn." She said, "Good for you. You're still doing God's work." So I said, "Well, don't forget, it was you who got me involved in this whole racket to begin with." So she said, "No, it was the Holy Spirit. It was the Holy Spirit." So it wasn't a big teary thing. You know, I thanked her for what she had done in my life. I mean, my life had taken a totally different trajectory after meeting her. I mean, it went in a totally different direction. So I really thanked her for that, and I hugged her and I said goodbye. And then 2 days later, I got the phone call that she had passed away. So the funeral was right there at Covenant House. There was a chapel at Covenant House right in Times Square. And it was packed. There were so many people there whose lives she had affected. And it was a beautiful service. And I remember her body was in this simple pine casket. I mean, this casket must have cost about $200 to put together. I've said to my wife, that's how I want to go out. I want to go out like Marge Crawford. I don't want to go in some expensive casket that's going in the ground anyway. So this beautiful, simple pine box. And it was a wonderful service. And at the very end, they wheeled the casket out into crummy 8th Avenue with the strip joints and everything, and it was quiet. You could hear a pin drop, but there was a saxophone player there, and he slowly played When the Saints Go Marching In. Oh, when the saints go marching. You could hear a pin drop. So I went up to Marge's son after, and I said, "That was so wonderful. It was so Marge. How did you arrange that?" And he said, "I took the subway here today. I got off at 42nd Street, and there was a saxophonist on the subway platform. And I said to him, if I give you $40, will you come and play When the Saints Go Marching In at my mom's funeral?" I said, "Marge must have loved that." And he said, "I'm sure she did." So now, one postscript. 15 years later, I'm up here in Burlington. I'm director of Spectrum, and a Burlington lawyer makes a very nice donation to us. So I didn't know the guy. I called him up. I said, "Gee, I'd like to meet you and show you what we're doing." He came in. I'm giving him the tour, and he says, "You know, your accent doesn't sound like Vermont." I'm like, "Right, it's the New York." He said, "Did you do this kind of work in New York?" I said, "Yeah, I started 25 years ago this place called Covenant House in New York City." And he goes, "Covenant House? Did you know my aunt, my godmother, Marge Crawford?" I said, "Yeah, I knew Marge Crawford. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing if I hadn't met Marge Crawford." Thank you.